Hi, you're listening to Exposing Men's Rights Activism TV. We're your hosts. This is Kevin, administrator of the Dismantle Misogyny page, and I am one of the leading admins of Exposing Men's Rights Activism, have been since the page had 38 likes, and now we've managed to broke 17,000 today, which is awesome. So today we are in the beautiful San Francisco, California, going to be having a discussion about men's rights activists, red pill activists, and the language that they use in terms of the dismissiveness of their language, especially when it comes to online and with discussions with feminists on feminist blogs or even on men's rights activist blogs where they get into kind of these brawls with feminists or feminist allies, and just the nature of their prose is very off-putting, very dismissive, and we'll be getting into that discussion.
Yeah, and if you really have these discussions really enough times or long enough, you can kind of see you get sort of the same cycles to them over and over again because the rhetoric just becomes so repetitive, and you kind of get like the same sort of logic used over and over again, and so naturally you'll be able to kind of pick out the flaws in it, when you're faced with it over and over.
Ad hominem, misandry, the same statements that they use to try to evade real conversations with feminists. And, especially when you're on a men's rights activist group page, trying to have a discussion just to see why exactly they think the way they do, you're usually met with a lot of animosity and a lot of, oh, well, you're just a feminist, you're not going to understand anything about men's issues. Well,
you're illogical.
Men's rights activists, right. We have a gentleman right here.
Hello.
Still doesn't understand your hang up with feminism. So, and then I naturally don't understand. I haven't understood since the whole Steubenville incident, which is when I started first getting really active into feminism, is just the arguments that y'all come up with. If you can even call them that, basically all I hear is screaming of misandry, you pointing a bunch of fingers at us and screaming statements like ad hominem, and it's very dismissive.
Yeah, it ends up being a type of thing where you get the sense that people see feminism as a threat to themselves or their values. When if you look at it, men have a lot to gain. Obviously, it's one of those things where you really have to let go of looking at it from a selfish perspective and just realize that you're not fighting for just yourself, like just what you have to gain that day, or I don't know, your own instant gratification, like what you see in a lot of like pickup artist communities. You really have to look at it as, well, I have something to gain too, because as anyone who's really looked at it, men have really a lot of kind of structure and like bonds placed on them from male gender roles, but you also just have to look at it as, well, am I trying to do the most good I can and prevent the most suffering and help people? And if you're looking at it from that perspective, it doesn't even matter whether or not you directly gain from engaging in activism. You're doing it on behalf of other people, and to try to create a better whole and a better community, rather than just I don't know, get laid, for instance, or something like that's just kind of a, I don't know. I mean, going back to the point about kind of the rhetoric that a lot of these sites use, and kind of how it just becomes cyclical. Obviously, there's the term social justice warrior, which, on top of being kind of laughable in its own right, is saying you're attacking for someone because they like social justice or they're passionate about it or fighting for it. I mean, it's just kind of it's ridiculous in its own right. It's also a term where the definition, as it seems to be used, is that this is someone who's fighting for social justice or saying something is problematic or advocating on behalf of a marginalized community because you're assuming that they are doing it to as brownie points or to try to, I don't know, feel better about themselves. When, really, it's an argument where you're assuming motives and projecting those onto someone, so that you don't have to engage with what they're saying and really go point by point and looking at their points and the things they bring up. You're just saying, well, I can dismiss whatever they're saying because they are doing it.
Oh, you're just a social justice warrior. I don't have to listen to what you're saying because you're just belly aching, playing professional victim.
Yeah. When it's like, can you not conceive that someone would actually have a real desire to fix social problems, like to make things easier and to make a society with less suffering overall. It's just one of those things, and you also have the term white knight that I think ties in
right
very closely with social justice warrior, and that's something that's specifically aimed at men mostly, saying that, well, you're only supportive of feminism or women's rights because you're trying to get something out of it, usually sex,
right.
Which is, I always find it funny because not only is that's that same sort of rhetoric where it's you're projecting and assuming someone else's motives in order to not have to engage with what they're saying. You can just dismiss it out of hand because you assume that their motives are, I don't know, selfish. And I mean, let me just say quickly that even if they were, it's still a question of doing the right thing for the wrong reasons versus the wrong thing for the right reasons. Like, but the real point of it is that it's projecting an objectifying view onto other men that they almost think the way I do, which is like seeing women as some type of goal or reward for doing something good,
a conquest to be obtained.
Yeah, whereas like, no, there's reasons that people want to support others and want to be an ally to groups that have been historically marginalized for the past several thousand years overall, more than just wanting to do it to trick them into having sex with them. And it's really indicative of their logic when that's the first conclusion they jump to, is like, well, this male is supportive of women or feminism. Well, clearly they're only doing it to trick them into having sex with them or to get on their good side or out of the friend zone. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but it's very aggravating.
Yeah, it's a good point about that is that when you're going and calling men who proclaim themselves to be feminists as white knights per se, not only are you being very dismissive of the argument and not providing a sufficient argument back, and just kind of lending yourself to a very childish notion of arguing or debating, if you want to even call it that. What you're doing, too, is you're giving into a very wrong notion that all men do to function is think about sex. And so that is the drive to them wanting to become feminists, is for them to eventually obtain this thing that, for thousands of years, people have just assumed that all men think about is sex and all women think about is just wanting relationships and wanting to get tied down to somebody. And then, it's a very false notion, very wrong thing to assume that that's something that is really built into the fabric of our society, because really these so-called natures have only been recent developments into the whole the existence of the human species, because it's only been about 10,000 years that class society and gender oppression and a lot of gender violence has kind of taken place. And before then, it was more like a very egalitarian, primitive communism type structure, wherein people had equal ground and you didn't have that rigid gender norm, gender binary to base off of. You had men, women, and then the recognition of people who were in between or either agender, didn't really recognize themselves as anything that
in a lot of
modern
cultures,
day would, that modern day would be seen as just the so-called norm, very cis, heteronormative idea of people just being, they're just being men and women, and them having this biological attraction to each other and dependency on each other, that, biological determinism that they can't essentially break away from, which is completely not the case, and is really an only recent development within the ideologies of human existence.
Yeah, it's a pure argument based on nature and saying that kind of cultural context or social upbringing doesn't have a role in it. When if you look at historically, I mean, there's in, for instance, ancient Greece. I mean, the cultural narrative there was that women were the ones thinking about sex all the time, because so you really have to look at these things relatively and not just take them unquestioningly as being like the way things are,
right,
from kind of an essentialist perspective. You have to look at more of a, like, apply kind of a social constructionist lens to gender, and really say that a lot of these things we kind of take for granted, a lot of these roles and assumptions that the boxes that we place people into, are, people don't really fit into them. It's not a clean cut thing, and I know that that's kind of an easy way to think about it, but really we're supposed to get out of like black and white diametrical thinking when we're children. That's an easy way to think. It's like, okay, up, down, black, white, left, right. We're kind of supposed to evolve beyond that, and really, well, we're on the subject of rhetoric. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on the argument that, well, feminism has a prefix fem, so inherently it can't be about equality. That's another kind of wording or rhetoric-based argument that I hear a lot. And I mean, something that I bring up is that, well, you have organizations like the NAACP that are clearly about fighting for equality, and we accept that on the cultural level, or the LGBT community. Those things are about fighting for equality, and I think most people recognize that. And yes, they can do that without having to have an S in LGBT for straight, or the NAAWP. But yet, feminism is something that still gets subjected to this really. I'd almost say this intellectually dishonest attack of saying that, well, really when you think about it, it's saying, well, you're trying to do us what we did to you. Not to have like an us versus them idea about it, but it's like, is it just the fear that, I don't know, but like we're just gonna have the tables turned? Like no, that's not the case at all, and I'm just so tired of that line. I was just wondering what you kind of thought.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot of times coming from men's rights activists, especially, where, there's the argument that, there's the prefix fem in feminism, and so what it means is that you want dictatorship of women over men. You want the reciprocated version of patriarchy. You don't want an egalitarianism.
Which, by the way, is admitting in patriarchy in itself something that people deny in the same sentence, saying, oh, patriarchy doesn't exist.
Patriarchy doesn't exist. But by the way, you want the same thing that we've been doing to you for thousands of years. So really, there's an inherent contradiction within that logic. You might want to restructure that if you want to stand any chance against people who know how to debate. Aside from that, though, back to the question at hand, and to be quite honest, I personally see that with a lot of people coming from a very reactionary point of view when it comes to Black rights, when it comes to trans rights, when it comes to women's rights. And you get people who have historically been privileged getting really upset over the fact that the underprivileged are actually wanting to fight for their rights and wanting to fight for the right to exist and to be equals to the people who have benefited from these privileges for extensive amount of time. And so what I really see that is I see that as kind of just like a reactionary way to derail a conversation by, first of all, completely dismissing the fact that within the dictionary, the definition of feminism is the equality of all genders. It doesn't mean femme über alles. Sorry.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it that's just and this comes in. What this really boils down to is people's misunderstanding of language in and of itself, like the roots of the language and the origins of the word. It really comes down to just trying to embody and caricature an entire movement and an entire base of people off of a stereotype that evolved when the feminist movement was first starting to get powerful.
Yeah, guys, like these anti-feminist arguments have been around for, since the suffrage movement. Like, you're not doing anything new.
You're not
I
new.
hate to break it to you.
You're not original.
It's been the same thing. Oh, feminists are all ugly. They're all man haters. Blah blah blah.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. Feminists are all older New Age women who are divorcees. And our most recent, one of our most recent posts on exposing men's rights activism is this statement where feminists are, I guess, are all socialist, child-hating divorcees, New Age women. Well, New Age, yeah, I guess I could. But number one, no, it's not just all women, obviously. Number two, it's not just based off of what you perceive as the gender norm and the gender stereotype of just being this dynamic between men and women. We have a lot of trans feminist activists as well, so feminism is a very broad specter that you have to look at. It's not just this isolated thing where a bunch of privileged people get gather around and start complaining about all of their problems, like men's rights activists, cis rights activists, white rights activists, bourgeois rights activists, for example, are getting really upset because, oh, how dare the working class decide to question our norms and ask for their rights. Who do these people think they are? No, and that's essentially what men's rights activism is men who have historically been privileged for the past 10,000 years at least.
Yeah, and guys, can I just say quickly that just because, I don't know, not everything's gone your way in life, or because you feel sad sometimes, it doesn't mean that you don't have certain advantages, or at least, the opportunity. It's like if you look at it
from a group perspective and not from an individual, isolated incident perspective.
You have to look at it historically and understand that in certain ways, we've all benefited, and it's not really, you don't have to see it as an existential threat to yourself or taking away your pride or whatever. It's just about helping people.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. So, what about I've always noticed this when it comes to men's rights activists and red pill activists, is that a lot of them tend to be heavily influenced by libertarianism. Especially the troll sites when it comes to the sites known as I got PTSD from a feminist post that didn't have a trigger warning or whatever the name of it was. These ridiculous, extensive names that go along with these pages and these blogs where 4chan likes to hang out.
Or something.
Yeah, they just...
Apparently they're really obsessed with the whole trigger thing. It's weird.
Yeah,
they can't understand
right.
And like emotional trauma, but okay.
Yeah. To speak to that, actually, now that we're on the topic of trigger warnings,
sure.
And of trolls, I'm going to speak as a person with post-traumatic stress disorder from rape and from parental abuse. These trigger warnings are very helpful. Reason number one being, especially in the United States, we have a healthcare system where a lot of people can't afford to go and see psychologists to get officially diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and to get subsequently treated. So we have to be cognizant of the people who don't have access to these resources, hence the trigger warnings that we place upon our posts on both of our pages, and we will continue to do so, by the way. So as a person with post-traumatic stress disorder, I personally see to it that the people who don't have access to the same things that I have access to when it comes to healthcare are still spared and given the option of deciding if they want to be exposed to trauma that could be potentially triggering or not. Within an article, within a video, within a discussion, or what have you. So trigger warnings do have their place within, not just within feminist discourse, but with all discourse, because a lot of things could be potentially triggering. Like racism can be triggering because there are millions of people that have been greatly affected by the racism, at least like within the United States, when it comes to the Black liberation struggle, when it comes to Australia with the Aboriginal struggle, when it comes
You
to
look at South Africa.
Right, exactly. When it comes to apartheid, when it, like especially now in what we're facing with the Palestinian liberation, you know, a lot of racism there, a lot of Islamophobia. So, like, there's a lot of things that could be potentially triggering that need to have a trigger warning attached to them, because there are people who have experienced a lot of trauma at the hands of racism, sexism, transphobia, you know, thoughts of suicide. These are all traumatizing experiences and could potentially place people back into the same state of mind that they had once they were experiencing the trauma. Flashbacks.
Yeah.
Is another term for it.
Right.
So trigger warnings are here to stay. And
also, by the way, they're not censorship. Like I've heard that argument a lot, that
censorship,
you're
freedom
putting
of speech.
You're putting a trigger warning on something, therefore you're censoring it. Well, no, that's not censoring it.
It's
Everyone
not
still
the
has
point
access
of the
to
trigger
the
warning.
content. And by the way, they're not a joke. It's, you know, I'm really glad that a lot of you haven't had to go through anything in life or had certain experiences or kind of mental illnesses that where you wouldn't be affected in that way. But I mean, all I want to ask is, like, does that give you the right to be as callous as some people really are consistently, to dismiss those and to not understand that other people have different experiences? Like, for instance, anyone who's dealt with suicidal ideation or even attempted or anything like that due to, you know, whether it's a traumatic event, severe depression, bipolar, anything like that. Yeah, it's one of those things where certain types of content or reliving certain experiences. A dog just ran into the
We're in a park, so
camera. Yeah, hazards of filming in the
Yeah.
beautiful sunshine here. But like I was saying, it's one of those things where unless you personally have experienced that, you're really not qualified to just dismiss that or to belittle it or undermine it. And also,
well,
you can just ignore it.
Well,
you know?
even if you had gone through those experiences, though, you're not really qualified to dismiss those experiences, because people are affected by things differently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's a good point.
where somebody might not have been traumatized by a rape situation, somebody else is greatly affected by it. So it's not.
You just
it's
have to
not,
be understanding.
Yeah, exactly. Be sensitive to the matters at hand. And this, I feel like this kind of goes back to the whole criticism of the social justice warrior. Yes, that is a derogatory term, by the way. So
I still can't believe that.
So
it's like an 80s cartoon show, like social justice warriors.
Right, exactly, like the Justice League.
Yeah.
Well, it is a derogatory term, but essentially you making statements about how we're social justice warriors just lends to the fact that you don't really understand the dynamics of oppression that people have been facing for centuries, and you don't really have you have a tenuous grasp at most over historical development when it comes to the shifting of ways that society has been structured. And these things don't just erode and evaporate after a revolution, if you will, or after a change of scenery, or a change of leadership. That's not how politics works. That's not how society works or social structures work. So to state that social justice warriors are people who are extra sensitive about matters at hand, you know, these matters haven't really dissipated, and they've still become an issue, and arguably, at least from our perspective as socialists, these matters are being exacerbated by the capitalist system as a way to kind of divide and conquer the working class, and to re-traumatize people with various types of oppressions that have existed for hundreds of years. So it's just the fact that you're sitting there trying to throw derogatory terms at us for having the audacity to call out oppression where we see it really gives way to your lack of understanding of the historical development of not only the United States, but the globe as a whole.
Right. And, that's a topic that we would like to get into more in the future, is kind of the interplay between the kind of structures of patriarchy being like a kind of where males can occupy the positions of power, and where gender roles play into perpetuating that structure, and how that also fits into capitalism, kind of the interplay between feminism and capitalism not being compatible ideologies.
Discussion on that to come soon in the series.
Yeah, because it's just such a fascinating topic, and it really kind of, each one kind of uncovers things about the other if you really look at them in conjunction. I guess while we're going through these topics, something I was interested in asking you is that what would you say to I guess men who see feminism as a threat, whether that's their masculinity or as somehow oppressing to them, or if you look at a lot of the things that men's rights activists at least pay lip service to defending, which is things like, well, it's really essentially just like fighting against male gender roles. I mean, I know my feelings on it are that feminism is addressing all of those concerns anyway. So you're essentially doing yourself a disservice while also actively fighting against the empowerment of other people, which is really in your own benefit as well. So I'm just kind of interested what you would say to people who question that, who really see it as bad for them, or as like somehow a threat.
It's kind of, I think it's kind of the same idea as talking about people who see like in any variation their historical privilege and historical power being usurped by people who have been historically oppressed, is that they see it as a threat because they see the oppressed people as a threat. They see it as a threat because they see equality as a threat. So there's a motive behind that, either the lack of understanding and ignorance that comes along with the inability to either by being raised to be very anti-feminist, or just not allowing oneself to read the proper material on it, or to even engage in discussion with the feminists, or, there's a multitude of reasons. But what it essentially boils down to, when you have people who are very anti-feminist, very anti-egalitarian, very anti-equality, and don't see emancipation as the oppressed people's as something that's worth gaining and fighting for, they're really stuck in just the whole status quo, the whole modus operandi of things. They really don't want to see any type of changes to the system, meaningful changes that could bring about a better way of living for people who have historically been oppressed. They want things to stay the way they are because that's where they benefit the most from. And you especially see this from cisgender white men who have something to lose from women gaining some type of ground. These, or conservative cisgender men who have something to lose from the loss of just the establishment of the rigid gender binary, of heteronormativity, of oppressive system that keeps people who are not men, cis men, from gaining any type of ground. So,
and I know it's an uncomfortable thing to admit is that, like, saying that, well, I'm put in a position to kind of have certain advantages and succeed in certain ways because of things that I didn't earn, but that's just kind of the nature of the situation that we live in. Is unfortunately we're still in a system where that matters.
mm-hmm.
What we're trying to do is basically just say that we want to get to a point where that doesn't matter, where those things don't automatically give you certain advantages. And like I said, there's still, even if you're looking at it from a completely selfish perspective, there's still things that men have to gain. So like it just doesn't. I mean, a metaphor that I look at is that it seems like a lot of people are, I guess, like opposing social change in a reactionary way, specifically in terms of women's rights, LGBT community rights, trans rights, like all those different areas, including race. It seems like they see themselves as part of a group here that has gotten to where they are by, I don't know, virtue
hard work and perseverance.
Of just being better. Okay, and here's marginalized community X, right? They see that as, well, they're trying to bring us down. Like they're trying to, attack. They're trying to oppress Christians, or they're trying to say being a man
reverse
is bad,
and
like bring that group down. Whereas really, what's happening here is we're trying to level the playing field, bring other people up. Like it's okay. Yes, I see how you see that as a threat, saying, oh, well, we're trying to drag us down. They're trying to say, you see it as like an existential threat, whereas really we're just trying to give everyone the same opportunities and really the same kind of right to life and right to exist on their own terms that you have. And I'm sorry, straight heterosexual, cisgender white dudes, but you are allowed to exist on your own terms and be kind of a sovereign individual, which I know it's easy to take for granted when you've never really had to think about it, but that's not a given for all people.
Well, it seems like we've gotten 32 minutes with our discussion. So, like I said, this is Exposing Men's Rights Activism Television with Kevin from Dismantle Misogyny and me from Exposing Men's Rights Activism. This is an experiment with our videos to see if we can gain any traction with these discussions and try to engage our audiences and try to engage our followers with this discussion as well. If you have any feedback for our videos, if you have any feedback for any topics that we discuss, of course we move through quite a few of them, or any questions, follow-up questions.
Like
Right, exactly. This was an impromptu conversation. This was not scripted, as you can tell by a lot of my whisper words here. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave some questions or even any comments. Leave some comments for us so that we get some feedback for our next discussion that we will have. And also, you should stay tuned for we will be doing some segments on social reproduction theory. And if you don't know what that means, there's we'll leave it in the comments section. There's an author known as Lise Vogel that discusses social reproduction theory. So this is part of our extensive project that we've been meaning to work on for a while. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for taking the time to watch our discussion here, and hope that you'll tune in next time.
Yeah, much appreciated. See you later.
See ya.